Nearly 130 countries containing 2.5 billion people have yet to administer even a single dose of a COVID vaccine. So, unusual question with this, what does Bill Gates have to do with that? New piece from journalist Alexander Zaitchik examines how Gates is playing a role in this massive vaccine disparity.
So journalist Alexander Zaitchik, he joins us now to discuss. Alex, it's good to see you. Tell us a little bit about what exactly Bill Gates has to do with all this.
Well, Bill Gates is arguably the most important single individual in global public health policy. Over the last 20 years, he has basically developed a second career as the sort of de facto czar of global public health. He's the largest funder of the World Health Organization. His organizations are the leading force in infectious diseases and vaccine distribution. In some cases, with underused vaccines, he's involved with through Gavi and through some research with an organization called CEPI. And he has positioned himself in a very interesting way where he's sort of a third force hinge figure between civil society, the industry, and to another extent, governments. And he has power in a very singular way over all of these overlapping circles. And he has used that influence. Basically, when you look at the last 20 years, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that aside from the concrete contributions he's made in absolute terms, which are real enough, if you step back, he seems to have performed the role of running interference for what is a system failure. We have a failed system on two very important fronts, which have been made clear in the current pandemic: access and research and development. And to the extent that he has obfuscated that system failure with promises that the edges can be sanded down and tweaked with market incentives and market mechanisms, it's going to be much harder to get past that system failure until we understand that role more clearly. And that's what I try to do with this piece.
Well, and Alex, one of the very specific issues that we've talked about here on this show is that these vaccine makers, big pharmaceutical companies, they have patent protection and are very protective of that because, of course, they want to make as much money as possible. And that has prohibited well-equipped, prepared manufacturers around the world from being able to churn out additional doses of the vaccine. So we basically have a shortage of vaccines, if you look in a global context, that is fake, that is created by these pharmaceutical makers. Now, the Trump administration kept that patent protection in place. So far, the Biden administration has done the same. But you argue in this piece that Bill Gates has been part of arguing for this massive patent protection that, not just with these vaccines, but in our pharmaceutical regime in general, makes pharmaceuticals more expensive and creates this fake supply issue that prohibits access, especially in the global south.
Yeah, in the context of COVID, he basically said this can be solved through a buyer's club. We can work on aggregating demand, depending on the charitable instincts of wealthy countries. Trust me, I have proven that I can solve, major problems in drug distribution and drug access in the past, and we don't have to worry about supply. And that was a huge gamble. And not only was it a huge gamble, but it's one that most public health experts and researchers thought was, quite frankly, insane. There were plenty of people saying, we absolutely have to worry about supply. We absolutely have to start preparing to ramp up production, scale up production, and get manufacturing capacity as advanced as possible, as soon as possible. And he basically dismissed that out of hand, out of the gate from the start. And that has been an absolute disaster. There's no question. His plan for COVAX was supposed to be 2 billion doses, which was always a partial goal, 20% of the poorest countries' populations, but he's nowhere near that. And we missed the crucial year. We missed a crucial year of being able to scale up and get the tech transfer where it should be to have global production at full capacity. And he basically said, trust me, and it didn't work.
So here's what I'm curious. Doesn't this conflict with a lot of the work that he's done on malaria and other vaccines in terms of mass vaccination on polio and others with his view on vaccine IP?
I mean, I think that those are not IP issues in the same way.
Right.
Some of those are no longer protected. We are now at the beginning of a pandemic where you have 20-year patents. You have technology platforms like the mRNA program platform at Moderna that they're very keen to protect. And there's a lot of money at stake. Billions and millions of dollars have already been made and will likely be made in the future if we need, boosters for God knows how long. So this is big business, but it's also more about the principle. And I think that's what gets lost a lot in conversations around Gates and his initiatives. There's too much focus on looking at, the technical details of programs, the concrete benefits, which can be real enough, but there's a lot of ideological components to what he does. And those do not get nearly enough attention.
Yeah, well, look, the guy obviously believes in the power of monopolies and doesn't have a lot of issue with them. So it makes sense that translates to his public health work. I think it begs a larger question about why one single guy, he's a billionaire and very rich man, but he's still just one person. Why does he have so much incredible influence over public health here and around the world? And I think it also begs the question, is something obviously Anand Giridharadas has written about. There's this idea of, we should just sort of turn over our philanthropic efforts or our social good efforts to billionaire class. And there's a lot of negative effects that can come with that as well.
I think the polite way of putting it is it raises governance issues. Absolutely. And the source of his power is obviously his immense wealth, which, as you alluded to, was based on a different kind of knowledge monopoly, the copyright of Microsoft's software. And he grew up as a fierce defender of knowledge monopolies in that context. And it was the software industry, I should mention, together with entertainment and pharmaceuticals, that basically wrote the WTO legislation that is now at the center of this debate. And he has been on that side ever since in every context, including the AIDS drugs fight in the 90s, which you may remember was one of the causes for the battle in Seattle in 1999 and 2000. There was this fierce debate, which kind of got derailed by 9/11. But we were having this discussion then, and now we're sort of having to relearn this about Bill Gates, but also about the larger problem with intellectual property regime being imposed by the World Trade Organization. So we lost 20 years of having this conversation, and we need to step it up before the next pandemic, because Bill Gates is now positioning himself to be the permanent central organizer for pandemic preparedness and response.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's awesome that he gives as much money as he does. That's fantastic. But we need to be asking more questions like you are about exactly what the strings attached are with that level of giving and what it has done in terms of shaping the entire regime for public health around the world. Alex, thank you for this piece. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Man.
More Rising for you after this.